All right, so let's talk about layer mask really quick. So I've got the one of the photos that I want to use opened up inside of Photoshop. So we're gonna start to work with these things called layer masks, and they're really powerful because what they're gonna do is they're gonna allow us to make the selections and be able to basically the same as copying and pasting, but there's a really big difference. And let me just show you really quickly why there is such a difference between these two, so you better understand why we want to do it this way. So if I make a selection, it doesn't really matter what my selection is. So I'll just take the polygonal lasso tool, and I'm just going to cut out this building really quickly. And I'm not going to do a great job right now because it just needs to be something to show us the basic idea of what the layer mask is going to do. So let's say I just wanted this section of this building, right? So when I have that, if I copy and I paste it, and I put it onto a new layer, or I take it to a different photo where I'm going to combine it. Maybe I've got an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper where I'm going to bring it into that canvas. The thing is, when I copy and paste, the only thing that I have is this image here, right? And if I look at it and I look at it and go, oh gosh, there was all these little details over here that I forgot as part of my selection, and I'm missing a little area over here, and I cut off the top parts of the chimney. There's really nothing that I can do about those pixels that are gone, because when I copied it, those pixels weren't inside of my selection, and so they don't exist. They're outside of that selection, and they will never be a part of my picture. Okay, I could try to make up pixels and I could paint, but that's not going to work. I'm not a great painter. So by doing a selection and just copying and pasting, it's what's called destructive, right? I have lost some pixels and I can't get those pixels back. And so what I want to do is work in a way that's going to be non-destructive. And so that's where layer masks are really going to come in handy. So I'm going to go back a couple of steps. I'm just going to do Option, Command, and Z, which will allow me to step back not only one step, but two steps. Where if I just do Command Z, it'll go back only a single step. So I like to use Option, Command, and then Z. In the newest operating system for Photoshop, they finally have gone to just regular old Command Z and be able to step back, step back, step back. So anyway, I've got this selection. So instead of just saying copy and paste, what I want to do is to create a layer mask. So I'm going to go ahead and click down here at the very bottom of the layers palette. There's an option, and when I hover over it, it shows me, it says add layer mask, and it's represented by a rectangle with a circle in the middle. And so when I click that, what it's going to do is it's going to attach next to that layer this other little side panel. And it's representing the areas that were active and the areas that are inactive within our selection. So everything that is white, it lets me see 100% of the pixels that are on that layer. Anywhere that it is black, it 100% blocks me from being able to see those pixels. So the effect is it looks exactly the same as the copy and paste currently, but it's editable. So if I need to make a change or I need to modify this, I still have access to all the pixels that are related to it or underneath it. So there's a couple of things I could do. Most of the time we're going to be using the brush tool in order to paint and change what's black and what's white or what's gray so that we can reveal or hide some of those pictures. So an easy way to think of it with the colors, so down here I've got my two colors. If I have actual colors here and not black and white, on the keyboard if I hit D, that'll set default, which is white in the foreground, black in the background. Also on my keyboard I'm going to use X a lot. So X switches back and forth. If you look down there at the bottom, it switches back and forth between which is the foreground and which is the background. So I can just toggle between those. And if we think of the white is going to reveal. So white reveals and black will conceal, right? So if I want to hide something, I'm going to switch to black. Black's going to conceal or hide some of those pixels on that layer. White is going to then reveal any of those pixels, right? So reveal, conceal, black and white. So I'm missing areas up here. So right now the black part of the painting on my layer mask is hiding the tops of these, the little chimneys, right? So if I take my brush, and I like to just use keyboard shortcuts. I usually keep one hand on the keyboard and one hand on the mouse or the trackpad or the pen. So I'm just going to hit B on the keyboard. That brings up brush. And it brings up whatever the last brush it was that I used. So it's a soft brush right now at 600 pixels, which looks really big on here. I like to just use the bracket keys. So if I do the brackets, I can do bracket down or bracket up. And those are the keys right there next to the P key and close to the return key. So I'm just going to make a fairly small brush. And I can start to then paint in some of these parts that are up here on our layer mask, right? So if we come in here, my flow is really low, so let me bring that back up to 100%. So anywhere that I paint, it's going to now reveal some of those pixels that I've gotten rid of, right? And so I can bring back anything that I want. Now, I'm picking up some of my background at this point, but the pixels are there, right? So again, they call that a non-destructive way of editing because I have the ability to come back and forth and clean up or modify. And if I miss some of the pixels, well, I can bring them back. They're not gone, which when we copy and paste, they're gone completely. So if I wanted to really make a better selection, I'm not going to do the whole thing right here, but I would probably zoom in. So I would do Command on the keyboard and then plus, 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 which will allow me to be able to see a little bit better. I'm just using, the scroll. If I wanted to drag, I could hold the space bar, and that allows me to move the window, and adjust it that way as well. Now, if I wanted to make a really clean selection, and I'm still going to be using a layer mask, well, I could use any of my tools. For something like this, just like the building that we did for our selections, the polygonal lasso tool will work really well. So I'm going to go ahead and use the polygonal lasso tool because I think it makes a cleaner line than something like the magic wand. But so because there's these sharp edges, I could go along here and I could make a pretty decent selection along the edges here. And once I've selected it, and I don't have to do the whole thing right now, but once I've got this highlighted, so I'm just going to come up to the top of those chimneys that we were looking at earlier. Once I've got it selected, I want the outside part to be what's selected, right? So if I come around this edge, go. Now, if I make a mistake with the polygonal lasso tool, in case you didn't pick this up in the tutorial, so if I went out here and I go, oh gosh, that's not where I wanted to go, I can always use the delete key, just like the magnetic lasso. It'll go back a step, just like the magnetic lasso tool. So if I feel like I didn't really like the way that I made that selection, I can always go back and kind of fix it without having to go back and finish the selection and then do the shift key and the option key to take away or add. So I want a nice clean line in this section, so I'm going to go around this area here to complete my selection, and this is where I started down here. So I'm just going to come over and finish that selection. So now that that is where my selected edge is, then when I hit B on the keyboard and I go and I paint, and now I'm going to be painting with black this time because I want to conceal those sky pixels. So I'm going to hit X on the keyboard. And then I can paint, now I can paint right up against that edge, and it'll give me a nice, sharp, clean selection along those areas, instead of it being, hand painted, and I've really got to try to control that and not go over the area that I want. I can just get right in there and kind of clean that area up. And to deselect, if you don't know, on the keyboard, Command D for deselect, will get rid of my marching ants. And now I've got a really nice, clean area. And I can zoom out. Again, I could use the minus. I like to use Command 0 a lot. That will then zoom out so I can see the whole pixels again in that area. So that's what the layer mask is going to do. It's going to allow us to, you can still do however you want to do your selection, but instead of copying and pasting, just go in and use these layer masks. Now, if I want to move this to another location, so we're going to be eventually building out an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper. So I'm going to make a new file over here. And along the top up here, there's an option for print because we are going to be printing these. So our first option is letter, and then it's 8.5 by 11 at 300 pixels per inch. So I'm going to create a file that is in that orientation. It gives us an option of portrait or landscape. I'm going to go ahead and go with a portrait because kind of what we're making is a poster for Les Mis. So I'm just going to go ahead and do it taller rather than long. And now that I've got my blank canvas where I'm going to put everything, I can go ahead and bring this, and I'm going to take this whole layer, including the layer mask, and I'm going to drag it to Untitled 1. So I'm just going to take this and drag it and release over here. Notice it went ahead and brought in my file just the way that I'd created it, but it also brought my layer mask. So unlike if I copied and pasted, if I come over here and go, oh, you know what I really want is also I want to get this part of the building over here. All I have to do is using my brush tool, right now I've got black as the foreground, so that's going to hide stuff. So I'm going to hit X, that'll give me the white. And I'm going to make my brush bigger. And I want to really be careful because I don't want to paint on the actual picture. So notice I need to make sure that I'm on the mask, and that's the active area, not the picture. Because I don't want to paint black over, or actually I'm on white right now. I wouldn't want to paint, and actually paint black in that area of the picture. So you can see a little black part showed up down there at the bottom over here in my mask. So I want to make sure that I'm on the mask, and I'm going to be painting with white, which will reveal. And what I want is I also want this front part, of the building, right? So I can come along here, and I can bring that part back. But unlike if I had done copy and paste, these pixels wouldn't be in any way available to me because they wouldn't exist. But because I did it with a layer mask, it's editable. So I can come back in here and I can grab those other parts of the pixels. If I decide, oh, well, I don't want this front area here, I can just switch back to black and I can take away that front step. I can edit, as much of it out as I want. And again, I'm using a soft brush, so if I wanted to control it a little more, I could just make a quick pen tool selection, or I could make a freehand lasso, or however I want to make a selection and paint right up against that edge and get a really crisp, clean edge. So as we're doing our work, I want you to be using those layer masks so that it's editable. All right? Really powerful. It's the best way really to be doing that type of editing. All right, so there's our layer mask. White reveals, black conceals.